Welcome to St. Olga, Julianne, aka Time Rider. Is it fine if I share that?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's fine.
Great. So you reached out to me a while ago describing your non-traditional avenue. You started out in academia and eventually obtained a PhD in clinical psychology and practiced psychotherapy for a number of years. And
Yes,
then you shunned it, you turned your back to it eventually,
I did.
and then stumbled on maybe my favorite whistleblower, Donald Marshall, and which you, let's say, resonated with. So
Yes.
going back to your memories, so from what you said, I can surmise that you're well experienced in lucid and even astral projection, lucid dreaming. And I guess at the beginning you chalked your memories up to dreams, but then
Yes,
with Donald Marshall's assistance, you managed to separate the two.
correct. Yes. Over my lifetime, when I was very little, I used to tell my parents that I was going to heaven at night because I had no sense of another place other than here. But I told them I was going on a train to heaven at night. And they didn't understand what I meant because, well, who would? This was the 1970s, and there was no sort of consensus narrative or anything. They had no sense of it, and neither did I just knew I was leaving my body at night, and I would leave my body so often that I would like it was fun for me to pop out of my body, and I called it boinging, and I would boing along on the ceiling. Like I could feel the ceiling physically, and I could flip around and look down and see myself. And this is something I did as a very little girl. And I soon realized that it wasn't heaven that I was going to because there were so many, bad things going on there. And that is exactly where I learned about sexuality because I didn't learn about it in my waking life, but I learned about it there. Now, I'm not saying I was always at the same cloning center as Donald Marshall or anything like that, although I do have memories uh, of Donald Marshall, although I would be willing to discuss those with you, but not in a public way, not just yet, because it's really complicated. Um, so that means there's a backstory, but I have only become aware of that in maybe the last 3 years. And I'm not saying I won't ever talk about it publicly, but for right now, I am slightly confused because it's confusing. There's a lot. But back to the cloning. Not only was I taken to more traditional places and spaces like a cloning center, I've been taken to a number of what I'll call like a VR scenario, where this was another thing actually that Donald Marshall talked about. The moment he said it, I was just sitting there like, oh yeah, that is exactly it. And in particular, Og Tellez talked about this too. He talked about it in a more scientific way than Donald Marshall did. He talked about it in terms of being scalar quantum energy. Our consciousness is being removed. Og called it a biomind, and that it's being placed in a temporal bubble where they have control of what we see as a more linear time, and they can create a temporal bubble or a place where the way we can think about it is time stops around it. So things can happen within that. And I would be put in these scenarios where something really bad would be happening to me, and then someone would come and save me. And then I would, of course, be grateful. And then I would begin having what I'm going to call now like a trauma bond with that person. But then later that person would end up hurting me physically. And those kinds of things do still continue. But yes, I was taken to more physical seeming places, as well as things that I think now were not like in an underground dump, but it was more, I guess maybe the folks in the new age would probably call it in a more astral realm or something. But it
Non-physical,
was
yeah.
like yeah, like it's a VR construct. Yeah.
Donald
and
Marshall
that,
did mention
yeah,
them. Did mention,
yes,
and that the Illuminati told him that he should say that those are the only ones that exist and that the physical one are real. But of
yes,
course, that was just manipulation. Yeah.
agreed, which is another criticism people have of Donald Marshall, because they say, well, he is not telling the whole truth. I think many of us are aware that he had to edit some of the things. I mean, he told as much as he could, and sometimes he told more than he was supposed to, and he paid for it the next week, right?
Yeah.
Also, he was told false things, and he admitted that too a number of times later on the pro boards. He said, they don't tell me anything, or, because they just know I'll come here and tell you guys. Or he would say, they told me X, but I think that's crap. It's a lie. So he started understanding with discernment,
Yep.
which is kind of like, I think, all of our experience in the truth movement. You go down certain rabbit holes. At least my experience for the 26 years is, you're over here, you learn this, and then you just get more and more discernment. And it's like an Aztec step pyramid. You're like, okay, nope, that, you get on a plateau, you learn, and then and then again, you could also explain that as moving through different levels of your consciousness.
Right. But with time, you were able to demarcate where you were taken physically to where you were taken in simulations. And could you maybe give us some, definition as to the cloning centers you have actually seen? Because Donald was taken to multiples. I take it you're the same.
Yes. At one point, they were taking me about, I don't know, somewhere between 2015 to 2020, in that realm. They were taking me to a place that it was clearly a military place, and it had one level above ground, but it was odd. It had like, I call it the grotto, because there were pools of water, like you would go through, and they would walk you down this cobblestone area, and there were these pools, and there were just abject crazy amounts of shit and torture going on in those little pools. It would be like, if you could imagine, an extra large hot tub, maybe about 6 or 7 feet across, just enough water, like maybe 2.5 feet of water, but with little round sitting area where, people could be sitting in them. And this place, and I could tell you if you're interested in some of the things I saw happening in those, but that is one of the places that they took me a lot, because there were a number of, like, I think you'll find that I'm not one of these people who's going to be able to give you a really long story about how I spent, 7 years on this other, place, and I worked, and I had extra wives or husbands or whatever. I don't have that kind of a story. But what I do have is that in those places, not only was I utilized for the part of my consciousness that they're very interested in, which we haven't talked about yet, but the Kundalini energy part, but they also utilized me in more science kinds of ways, where I was involved in, like, as my role as a doctor, as a clinician. Like, they would greet me, hello, doctor, how are you today? I would have a military escort. We would walk down through the pools, the grottos. And I had learned in those situations to just look straight ahead, because of what was often going on. So it was a very strange blend, but it was very real. It was very, very unlike any kind of a dream place. It was very physical. But going all the way back, the number one thing is brain research. I have kind of a quirk, I guess, about my brain. And I didn't really put this all together till maybe about 10 years ago, because it's been happening my whole life. But I couldn't figure out why I was always being taken to, or I was always having dreams of medical places, medical centers, hospitals. And there were people in white lab coats, but I was always being put in elaborate headgear, and they were having me focus electromagnetic energy in various areas. And so I didn't quite understand until about 10 years ago exactly what it was, until a memory finally resurfaced of me being in an area where I was sitting with 4 other people, and we had this elaborate headgear on, and they wanted me to electromagnetically cause the other people sitting around there to have an orgasm. Okay.
Mhm.
So I'm able to do that. And when I remembered that, I put it together, because this quirk that's been going on with me, and it's bizarre and it's embarrassing, but starting when I was about 17 and a half, I started having what men would call wet dreams, female nocturnal emissions, where you're asleep and you have a very strong orgasm. The brain is the largest sexual organ. It is not genitals. The brain is what makes us have an orgasm, whether we're interested sexually or not. That's why people who have pornography addiction can be watching porn, all the time, and masturbating, and nothing's happening. Their mind has to be interested in it, which is why porn is so invasive, because it keeps moving the line in the sand. It's like, okay, this is what gets me excited. Okay, now this does, and it moves into deviance pretty quickly, right? So
Yep.
the first time it happened to me, I was in a dorm room in college with 40 other women, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and by this time I had had sex, but only recently. So I knew what it was, obviously, but I was horrified. I thought, what am I doing in my sleep? But I had just been sleeping, and I was in a kind of a sleeping bag, and my arms were out. So no one was doing anything to me, and I wasn't doing anything to me. So about 2 weeks later, I had to go get my birth control pills refilled. So I went and saw my OBGYN, and he was an elderly man who was about to retire. And I felt, he's an old man, I can just talk to him and ask him, I felt I was shy, but I told him, I said, this weird thing happened to me. I said, I think it was like how guys have a wet dream. And he rolled back in the chair. I'll never forget it. And he was absolutely delighted. He thought it was the greatest thing ever. He said, oh my God, I've been practicing for 40 years. I've never met a woman who has nocturnal emissions. Well, good for you. He claps me on the back, and I was like all kinds of horrified, right? I was really embarrassed. I was just like, okay. And he said, do you know who Alfred Kinsey is? And I said, no, because I hadn't started my psych degree yet. So I hadn't studied the sex work that he had done in the 50s to study sexuality. So he told me that he had done reports, and that he had come to some conclusion that women could have nocturnal emissions too. And I don't remember what the stat was, maybe 30% of women, but it seemed very high. And the doctor said that he had reviewed that research and didn't think it was well controlled at all. And he thought it was skewed. And he said, just judging for me, he said, I've heard it all, but I haven't heard this. He said, I've been waiting to hear this. So he was just thrilled that day. He thought it was the greatest thing ever. So fast forward all these years, I'm 55 now. This started then. This has happened to me, and sometimes it's more, but absolutely at least once every 6 weeks, my entire adult life. So, and I've ran the gamut about what I think about that, from it's amusing to like, what is this, to, I've had partners or my husband who think it's pretty awesome, to jealousy, men that I've dated who don't have that, who are like, what, this isn't fair. Because by then I was a grown woman, I'm like in my 30s, and these guys are like, how are you having them? And I never did when I was a teenager. I don't know. It's just my brain. So what I'm saying is it kept happening, but it was pretty much as regular as menstruation to a woman, to me. So it was in a small part of my mind. It's not like I was sitting around thinking I was some, divine feminine sexual goddess or something, and I just thought it was a quirky thing about me. But about 10 years ago, I started kind of pseudo keeping track of it because an interesting situation happened where, and I know this strains credulity, but it happened. This happened. I had one that hit me in the night, and sometimes it's so strong that it almost literally knocks me out of the bed. Well, this happened, and my husband, who was laying next to me, like I got knocked out of the bed, like I woke up and it's like you're having an orgasm. I'm like, although they hurt, they're not really pleasurable. It's very strong and it's in my head and it hurts. It hurts my head, like I get a headache afterwards. So I'm like bent over. I fell out of the bed and I'm like, like it's very pleasurable, but it's painful pleasure, right? All of a sudden I hear on the other side of the bed, my husband sits straight up and like say, and I'm like, and he's told me it's okay to recount this, but my mind made him have one too. And he was in his 30s at this point and had never had one in his entire life. So I started thinking, wait a minute, is this what all that weird headgear is about? Is this what? And I started thinking, and I've kept diaries my whole life, all the way back. And I started looking back, and I always draw things if I see something in my mind, and I've drawn all my life. So I have all these bizarre pictures of headgear, strange electromagnetic devices with electrodes. And I started thinking, oh my God, that's what they're studying about my brain. Because I had someone, when I was about 35, tell me this was happened when I was pregnant. This was my first pregnancy. I had my babies later in life. And while I was wherever I was, either a liminal space in a temporal bubble or in an actual physical place, I don't know on this one, but I had someone tell me, we're studying your brain. And so I knew they were studying my brain, but I didn't know what they were studying. So that's how I put two and two together. And so then I started keeping track of them and when they happen and trying to find a correlation with anything. And, I have several theories and all kinds of things about that, but hopefully that answers your question of why they've been taking me my whole life, what they've been taking me to study, and obviously harvesting that energy very clearly.
Right. I was just curious to maybe press into that a little bit. Do the wet dreams come with any audio and video? Because at one point you mentioned seeing things as on a screen, pixelated, and that you even with time managed to gain somewhat of a foothold and control them.
Yes. Over the years, it's been a variety of different things. When I was younger, it was almost all what I would call MK Ultra, what I'd call now MK Ultra visuals that were given to be in my head of a more sexual nature, a naked guy, a naked woman, something that was of a sexual nature. But there were also really horrific things. One of their very favorite things to do is to either be raping a person or an animal, primarily dogs, and killing them right when they're like, I'm not, it's unclear to me whether, well, I know we have governors on all of our consciousness here. Like we have abilities. I think even some of your other guests would agree with that, Arkeem and others who they have other abilities that are capped here in this realm. Well, this ability that I have is apparently strong enough that they can't cap it completely because it still bleeds through. I also believe they're harvesting that energy on a cyclic nature, and that's why I've had them pretty regularly. So I think it's a combination of me creating it because they've studied that so many times, but it's also times where they pair it like in a classical conditioning kind of a way with something torture, something very horrific. I'm a huge lover of animals, especially dogs. And so the entities that are standing around get a particular buzz off of that when they can create that scenario where they're hurting someone while this is happening. But yeah, there are certain scenarios where I'm able to handle it, as far as the ones specifically where sometimes they'll have me in a room and they'll show me, like, it looks like a spinning portal. It's just whirling around and around and around and faster, and I'm focusing on it, and then it'll happen and it'll wake me up. Or it'll be, like I had said before, it'll be a bunch of pixels on a screen, and they want me to focus on moving the pixels around. And while I'm moving them around or up and down, or they'll tell me to make a shape with the pixels or something. So I'll do that, and then it'll happen. Or sometimes it's just old school. They'll have me in headgear, other folks in headgear, and they'll just tell me, you know, and they're looking at they're looking at big screens, they're looking at all kinds of tech, and they're telling me, okay, do the voodoo that you do, like. And I'd like to just add that, I'm not like consenting to this. I'm not interested in this, whatever their agenda is. I'm not interested. A lot of times I'm kind of sassy and pissy, and I'll just be like, I'm not going to do it. And then that's when the electrocution and just getting gutted and bled out and stuff like that happens. The torture stuff. The last time that happened was a couple months ago, and I got beat to death with a pipe. A man standing to the left of me beat me down on the back of my head and my neck and my back till I was flat on the ground. And then I felt my consciousness be pulled out of the clone that I was in at the time. So to answer your question, I've had kind of this umbrella of different experiences where, sometimes it's a more concrete space and place. Other times it's been more scientific. Other times it's just been, I guess you'd say, for their enjoyment or amusement.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Torture spectacles, like Donald Marshall saying.
Correct.
Their depravity is pretty much off the charts, but much of that sex stuff probably has to do with Solomonic magic and Luciferianism, rituals, right?
Yes.
Did you ever witness any other things like eating of children or hunting parties?
No, I never, that I remember. I don't remember anything like a hunting party, although I believe they happen because there are so many credible survivors that talk about that. But I don't think in the consciousness transfer part of this that they do as much of those hunting parties. I think those happen more literally and actually live in this realm.
Yes.
And as that, and they do so love that. And what was the other one you asked me? Not hunting parties, but
consuming children. Which
yes. Yes. I have not seen them eat any children, but I have seen them growing children. I have seen them growing regular looking babies in very strange looking tech. And I've seen them growing hybrid children. They're like augmented looking tubes that have a spiral around them. They have high faces. It's hard to explain. It's almost like their head is like, it's a more box shape, and they're taller, like their torso is long. Very, very odd. And I've seen all manner of hybrids. I've seen all kinds of that stuff. And I've been made sex with hybrid things, like people with like half man, half pig, just crap, to be honest with you, Daniel, just bullshit that I just like, fuck this. But as far as eating children, no. I was going to mention something. Oh, the people in cages. Og Tellez was one of the ones who first talked about, around maybe 2017, the people in cages, which is why I identified right off the bat that he also was telling a portion of truthful material, because that is something I've seen a lot, where they'll put you in a scenario, and not only are they watching, but there are walls of people in cages watching. My husband and I were put in something that at the time I thought we were in a room that had like long ropes on us because we were jumping off of walls and coming together in the middle, like we were on pole, like ropes. And I thought, I didn't know what we were on. I thought we were like in like an acrobatic gear, and we were made to have sex, like brutal sex, and just awful. And there were cages of people there. And I remember it very vividly because it was an awful experience, to the point where they were like, you know, it was bloody and gory and awful. And when I finally walked out of there, my husband wasn't living anymore. And there was this sweaty, awful looking, like there were a lot of naked people in cages. And the one who comes up to me, like he's in my face, and he looks at me and he goes, "I've seen better." I mean, this is a guy in a cage, right? And I was pissed. I was like, I just had to basically fuck my husband to death. So fuck you. So I spit on him. I'm a little sassy. I was like, fuck you, you know, like, you know, and I don't remember anything after that. But when I saw Altered Carbon, you know, when it came out in like 2016, 2017, they show a husband and a wife in it's in an augmented reality tube where they are literally their bodies. And have you seen that show?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
You remember what I'm talking about?
Accurate.
And they're floating around, and they have to, they don't show them fucking, but they make them fight. When I saw that, I was like, oh my God. And I told my
In zero
husband,
gravity.
yes, I said, yes, I told my husband, that is what we were in. I thought we were on rope things because we kept boinging around the room, and he would be on one side and I'd be on the other. And someone would say, fight, you know, and then they'd start screaming, you know, fuck, you know, it was awful. This shit is just fucked up. The shit these people get down to is fucking awful. I'm serious. And I have no doubt, you know, Og said that there are huge populations of people in cages. Well, you know, I can't speak to that. I didn't see huge populations, but I saw, you know, it was like a Thunderdome kind of a scenario. And there was at least, I don't know, 250 people there in cages, and they were watching. And I would assume they watch a lot of it, given the way the guy reacted to me. You know, he was like, I don't know, like nobody wants to harm your partner. You don't want to harm your partner, and you don't want to be forced to have sex.
No.
Right?
May I ask if your husband remembers any of this?
No, but he has his own interesting story. So in 2016, when I really started, like I said, it's been about 10 years now when I started putting together that it was the Kundalini energy. I just call it that, but the chakra energy or whatever, the feminine energy. It's the Magdalene energy. That's why they called Mary Magdalene the tower, the peak. The peak is the no ledge. No ledge is a peak. She's the tower of the magenta, the purple crown, all of this metaphors that the elite put out there esoterically. They're talking about this energy. So my husband, you know, I had been saying, I swear to God, this is what they're studying about me. And I had not had the experience yet where I remembered him and I in the Thunderdome situation. But I had been, of course, doing a lot of research on Donald Marshall by that point. And Donnie had said, look, y'all don't know it, but you're being tracked 24/7, right? So I was having a conversation with my husband about this, and I said, I believe we're in some kind of an augmented holodeck construct where everything 24-hour, all that we're being watched, literally the Truman Show. And Og later, years later, like around 2018, 2019, talked about how they can open, that we live in a type of a plasma that we can't see it, but, you know, we're breathing it. We're literally like in a sea of plasma, and that they can open up a scalar window, like wherever they want, and watch whoever, and that all of us are tracked. And I think there's plenty of evidence. Like if you look at the channel, Look Out for Charlie, he's doing a lot of fine work on that about the AI. He's picking up what the AI is doing, monitoring all of us, even out in the woods where there's no people around. So this place is monitored 24/7. And whether we want to believe it or not. And I know for sure at this point that that's happening for a number of reasons, lots of different stories. But in this case, I was trying to convince my husband that I had come to this understanding. And he said, that's just crap. He said, I can believe a lot of stuff, honey, but like, I mean, we're not being monitored 24. I don't see it. And I said, we're being monitored. He started talking shit. He's like, they're not fucking monitoring me. That's bullshit. Like, nobody's monitoring us. You're fucking getting paranoid with this shit. And he normally isn't like this, but that time he was very like, so I think a part of him was worried. Well, I think a part of him was worried that I was telling the truth, right? Yeah. So I was like, okay, whatever. So we lay down in bed, and about 2 hours later, you know, we're asleep, the kids are asleep, the dogs are asleep, it's quiet night. I wake up to him screaming, and I've never heard this. I mean, we've been together 15 years, and I've never heard this before or after. Like, literally shrieking, like in an unholy type of just wailing. And I it's dark, so I'm like, what the fuck, you know? And he's screaming. He's on the floor, and I hear him kind of crawl walking. He was like downward dog yoga moving, crawling like into the bathroom. Like, he was screaming, my legs, my legs, my legs. And so I got up, I turned on the light, I run in, I'm like, what? And he the toilet seat was down, and he's in his boxer shorts. So he sits down and he goes, my fucking legs. And he's screaming. I'm like, stop, what is it? And he spreads his legs out, and he said, they have my legs in a vice. My legs are in a vice. And it was so wild. On the inside of each thigh, there were round hole marks. And he was yelling at me that they had a stake of wood stuck between his legs and vices on both legs, and they were pulling them apart. And so I took pictures. I'm like, oh my God, because I knew what that was, because Donnie had said that sometimes when something happens in that type of a consciousness transfer, your actual body will have what's called a pain echo, which I have experienced later since then. But my husband's body was experiencing a pain echo. So I knew what it was immediately. I ran and grabbed my phone. I took pictures of both, and gradually over about 3 minutes, they faded away. But he was sobbing, like bent over. And he's a big, strong guy, you know, and he was bawling his guts out. He said, I'm never going to doubt what you say again. He said, oh my fucking God. He goes, we are being fucking monitored 24/7, and they fucking wanted to prove it to me. And I said, yep, absolutely. And that's what happens to me if I start talking any kind of shit like that, like, fuck you, fucking don't want this, fucking leave me alone. Then I end up somewhere where someone's like, really? You don't want this? Well, how about you like this? And then there's some kind of weird tech put on my head, and I'm electrocuted. So when Donnie talks about this stuff, it resonates with me because I have numerous stories of that happening to me. So I don't have to like imagine that happening. It has happened, and I witnessed it happen to my husband. So, right. Yes.
His etheric body must have transferred over the wound. Do you think that was REM transfer, and is that the most frequent that you're subjected to?
Yes and no. There have been so many times in my life of missing time in this level of the realm, and weird situations where things have been changed and moved around, and there's just been a lot. So either I'm so heavily MK Ultra'd at times that I'm altering out, and so I'm losing time, or I'm being transferred out the way Donald talks about now. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. While he's under the electromagnetic TARP thing that he's under, they can't take him during REM, but when he leaves it, they'll take him during the daytime, which is what's interesting because they can bifurcate consciousness where he's just going to the bathroom and getting a sandwich and he doesn't realize it, but a part of him has been transferred, right? And then he gets into his underneath the TARP, and then that memory will be returned to him. as that has happened to me a number of times in my waking life. But if I had to guess, I would say that more so it has happened during REM, because they're very interested in what this nocturnal emissions thing is that I can do with my head. And so if I had to just guess, I would say they've done more of that with me in the REM realm. Yeah.
And you mentioned something about your biomind, your individual spark being able to be split around 7 times in such a way that wouldn't be watered down. And where did you come by this nugget of information?
Well, I think it's a combination of different things that I have seen in different spaces and places where there are other versions of me, where I've been transferred into other versions of me. And at times where I've realized that it's in either an MK ultra visual, it could be that they could have just transferred me into a temporal bubble and made me assume or tried to trick me that I'm in an altered dimension or something when I'm not, or I am in multiple places with other versions of me that are living other lives. And I'm more inclined to believe that simply because of the different experiences that other version of me and how different they are. But also I have been transferred to what I think are other versions of me here and now. And I think it's, I believe it's just one more tactic in the way that they utilize us. Like, imagine you had, there's a consciousness that's very powerful, and they're energy vampires, they're energy eaters. So they're gonna cut that however many ways they can and split that out and then utilize each piece. They're not going to split it so much that the pieces can't actually function in this realm because they need that energy, but they're going to split it enough so that they can split the booty between them, the bounty of the treasure, right? Which is why, as a side note, I truly believe there are other versions of Donald Marshall alive and well and making music. But I'll talk to you about that off air too.
Okay.
But there's more than one of some of us that are being utilized. And so I had that sort of pretty clear in my head already because of all the different experiences. And then when I ran into Og Telez's excellent scientific-based information, I read his book, read his entire, he posted maybe over, 700-800 on his blog, long things. And he still does actually on X and on Substack. I highly recommend people read that information. It's very important. But he suggested that up to 7 times the consciousness can be split. So as far as it being 7, that's where I heard that information. But knowing that it had been split, I had come to that conclusion before. I have no way of knowing if there's 7, but I would assume that they've split and capped me off and put governors on me to the level where they can keep me at a lower level of functioning, but still different people utilize that energy.
And REM is just one of the different types of consciousness transfers, and your other versions can look like you, but they can also differ, but while still retaining your DNA. Absolutely,
100%. There are different realms where I'm the male version of myself, and I don't look like me. And then there are other realms where I don't know because I don't have a way of looking. But there are other times where I've been in situations, a lot of the medical stuff, where like I'll find a way in a lucid way to try to find something that's reflective, like a mirror or a window, like in the nurse's station, to get a look at, is that me? Is it this me, or what me is, do I look like me? I've been transferred into younger versions of me, older versions of me, male versions of me. Have you ever seen the show Sense8? That kind of talks about, it had a little bit too much sexual content for I don't care. I'm not a prude. It's like a lot of fucking in that show. There's what it is about 7 people who are also 7 or 8. It's the same consciousness split between different people in our realm. I think, I don't remember it it's been years ago, but 3 women and 4 men, or maybe vice versa. But anyway, they could tap into the other versions of themselves. And I think that was soft disclosure, because that's a lot what I've experienced. Just being in other versions of me, I can look like this, or I can look totally different.
Mm-hmm. And have you noticed any patterns in terms of the target, the victims they choose? Do they have to be attractive or have a certain skill? And what about, do they have a certain nationality or race?
I would say no. I mean, just the other people that I've seen there, it's a cross section. Honestly, whatever they are, they seem to be very interested in all forms of everybody in humanity, all colors, all races, men, women, children. Of course, we have a lot of pedophiles. There's a lot of that involved in the situation, but I haven't run across a situation where I never felt like they ever had any kind of bias, but they are looking for some kind of special thing. They are looking for different people to either make them money or make them energy. So that other thing that I resonated with when I came across Donnie, because I was starting to understand that maybe I was being utilized in some way. I didn't understand it. I had no context for it. But as the years came along, I've grown to understand that that's why they utilize him. Also, they're addicted to hurting him.
Yeah.
There's that too. They're just literally addicted to it. Yeah.
And did you also not get the impression that there were multiple factions that didn't have anything to do with each other that were siphoning energy off of you?
100%. There are times where one faction will be doing something and I'll literally get transferred out of there and someone else will take my consciousness somewhere else. That's happened a lot. I guess I have my own sense of spirituality. I don't have any kind of like organized religion, but there are higher beings that intercede. There just are. People can call them angels, people can call them whatever they want. You're welcome to. But there have been beings that have intervened on my behalf when things have been very bad. So I 100% know there are different factions. And some of them are just interested in a science-y kind of a thing. Some of them are literally very neutral, very balanced. Some are apathetic and don't give a shit. And then some are clear over on the let's party in a horror show kind of a thing.
Right. What about, have you seen, let's say, heads of state or mafia members or, celebrities?
Yes. Yeah, I'm not really ready to say the one person who's always there just simply because this person is a very famous person. And I just believe that somehow this person thinks that they either own me or they have dibs on me, or I just don't know. There's a lot of confusing. There are lots of memories. There are lots of memories with other celebrities around. I've seen all kinds of different stuff like that. But there is one public figure that's there a lot. And I could never figure out why I was dreaming about them when I was younger. And I mean, this is 30 years ago. So it's been a very long thing. And again, I'll talk to you about that off air. But yes, I can confirm that, because what do you do with that information, right? Like, this is someone who I never followed in any way. I'm not interested. I really never followed movies or celebrities or politics. I've always been an outlier. I've always been interested in kind of my own thing. I've always thought politics was a sham and a lie. And I thought celebrity was fake and uninteresting. So to have this person, it's a male, show up so many times and have so strong a memory, and it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome kind of a thing. And I can diagnose that in myself, right? Because I'll wake up and I'll think, oh my God, Or I'll just be doing something and then there will be a memory that just, comes out of the blue. And I'm like, what in the fuck? What? How can I be linked? I'm somehow trauma bonded with this person through a lot of stuff. And what's really crazy is this person is in the public sector, and I believe strongly they are not fully human. They are some kind of a hybrid, because this person can move and like levitate, and I'm in solid places. So it's bizarre. It's just they have tech. Even if I'm transferred to a place like an underground military base, they have tech that can make you feel like you're seeing them float. I don't know if he can actually float, but they can make me think he's levitating, which is fucking crazy.
And at one point, you mentioned that he behaved differently. And then when you asked him about that, he said that, no, I mean, just retell the story. You're going to do a better job than me.
So most of the time, there's a certain core personality there. Kind of the way that I can feel Donnie's core personality in his music and his lyrics and the things he says. I'm sure all of you listening, and you also, Daniel, you have a sense of a person's way they make you feel. Like when you're around someone, it's a certain frequency. You get a certain. We just have ways of knowing their personality and the way they make you feel about them. It's a kind of a vibration. It's a type of a resonance. And this person has a very strong resonance, and it's not a completely good resonance. I'm not saying he's, and everything is very blended anyway. Blended isn't the right word, but it's all smeary anyway because of this. What I feel is I have some sort of Stockholm syndrome where I want to make excuses for the shitty things that he does, because there are times when he's not cruel. There are times that he's kind, or he saves me from other shit, right? And that's happened a lot. But one time, and this happened about a year and a half ago, this time was a night transfer, or it was an early morning transfer, around 4 or 5 in the morning, when I was in my last cycle of REM, because REM, you cycle like every 2 hours, you go into REM. So you have your sleep cycle, and you go through REM, and then you come up out of it, and then you go back down into deep. You come back up in REM again. So in the night, it's kind of it's a sine wave, okay? So I was in my last REM cycle, and REM is like an engine that cranks up. If you do any sleep psychology study, you'll see how like your first REM is a little bit weaker, and it gets stronger and stronger. And so by the last REM, your energy is stronger, which is why people will wake up sometimes in the early morning after their last REM, with their heart racing, and, because when you're REMing, it's causing a lot of physiological changes in your body. So at any rate, I was in my last REM cycle, and I felt myself being transferred somewhere, and I was in a version of me that was tied. I was tied up, and this person was sitting in front of me. And then I kind of looked forward, and I just felt like he wasn't his normal self. And I said, you are not the entity that is normally in, and I said the person's name. And he had the strangest look on his face, like he was surprised, but then he looked delighted and kind of giggled, like in this really creepy, awful way, and said, I am in many at once. And I said, oh, like Legion in the Bible? And he said, exactly like Legion in the Bible. And his face was just flat and cold. And I said, please just let me go. He said, no, I need you. I said, no, you don't. He said, oh yes, I do. And then I was booted out of there. So, I have heard various folks in the truth movement say that some of our celebrities and political leaders and athletes are carrying more than one consciousness. And here's how I feel about that. If they can hybridize bodies, which they can very easily, they can hybridize consciousness, and they can create blends of this consciousness, this electromagnetic energy, so that a person is carrying more than their own consciousness. And that's what I think I ran into on that day. It was someone else literally driving or roboting his body or
Right.
something else.
Because Donald Marshall mentions that politicians and high-ups people also get body snatched through technology or through aliens, not just
Yes.
intraterrestrials, but extraterrestrials as well.
Yes.
Since we're on the topic of abductions and blocking the transfers, can you go over? So let me just set it up. So,
Okay.
a long time ago, I think when he was a teenager, he teased Queen Elizabeth that not even you can block the REM transfer signal, probably in an effort to get something out of her. And she totally bit the bait and got, angry and told him that, yes, actually, you can through scalar wave scrambling technology, but that's something that you'll never have access to because you're poor. And the people around her at the time, turned their nose at that because it was supposed to be a tightly held secret. But Donald Marshall did make a note of that, and all these years later managed to scrounge enough money to buy those, and allegedly has successfully halted the transfers of any kind, and is enjoying the best time of his life in the last, I don't know, a month and a half. So upon hearing this, you took him up on it and purchased the devices for yourself. And could you give some feedback about how that went?
Sure. So I don't the device that he has, what's called a Defender, he has a 4-pack. He said, one would probably suffice, but he wanted to get all 4. And this is not from the pro boards. This is from his recent social media, probably in the last like 3-4 months. So, I have a lot of interference at night myself. And so I thought, well, why not? And so I went ahead and I have purchased the Defender, one of them. I can't afford to get 4 of them. I think one will be good. So we'll see. That's coming in the mail right now. So I don't know. I can't speak to that yet, but I do have this one. This is the $200 one. They call it the chakra pendant. And the reason I chose to do this is it's a combo product. It is got supposedly 3 feet of scalar defense around you, like a fence, kind of a scalar fence. And on top of that, I don't know if you can see it blinking through the camera, but it blinks scalar energy to the chakra centers up and down the spine, the Jacob's ladder up and down the Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow. I'm sure everybody's aware of the chakra stuff. And I'm not like a hokey crystals kind of a thing, although there's power there, but I don't know much about that. But what I did think was there's truth about our bodies, the piezoelectric energy that even our bones and our body gives off, the electromagnetic signature, and that this is readable on scalar energy healing devices. You can actually measure it and see. And I thought, I'll start with one of these and see if I notice anything at all. Because I do get transferred at night and have all kinds of adventures. And as you and I talked about before, I have this sort of nocturnal dream thing that happens to me. And I just wanted to see, what will this do to HIT? Because hypothetically, if we're looking at like the orange chakra, then that, and then all the way up to the purple crown, I was wondering what will that do to what happens to me at night and my own sort of weird thing that my brain does. So I've had it now for 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks today. And I'll tell you, for the first 2 days I put it on, it's really strange. I felt really weird. And what's odd is I just put it on and dropped it beneath my t-shirt and I forgot I had it on. So I started feeling really weird like an hour later. And I was telling my son, man, I do not feel good. I feel dizzy. I feel, and he was like, well, did you eat something? I was like, no, I don't really know. And I had literally forgot I put it on because you just wear it. It has just like a neck thing. You don't have to wear it around your neck, but that's where I put it. But I'm really busy right now. I'm trying to get moved because like I shared with you, why I haven't done any other videos since last year, because right after I put out the video last year, my mother died in April last year, and then 3 months later, my father died, and I'm an only child, and so I've been it sent me kind of reeling for about a year dealing with their deaths and basically the backlash and the estate and all of it. So anyway, so then I realized, I wonder if it's this. I wonder, so I took it off and I didn't really feel markedly one way or another. And I was trained in science, so I'm kind of thinking, well, at first I had forgotten I had it on, so that's a real effect. That's not like a correlation where in my mind I made it happen. I'm like paranoid about it or worried about it, which I wasn't. But, you can always argue, well, you knew it was there, so that's why you felt dizzy. None of that happened. But I just thought, okay, I'm just going to leave it on. I read the pamphlet again, and it said it can cause some disconcerting dizziness, whatever. But I just wanted to give it a chance. So about 4 or 5 hours after that, I felt this amazing energy surge, and I had kept it on. And to be honest with you, it's been there ever since. Like supercharged energy. It's bizarre. And in psychology, there's like mediating variables and moderating variables. These are the types of things that can affect an actual stimuli or variable. And one thing affects the strength or the direction of the other. And what I would say is that this device has helped with the overlays that we live in. Like we live, I don't know what we live in, but we live in some kind of generative computational, I don't like the word simulation, but it's definitely a mathematical it's an AI that produces organic things, which is an oxymoron, I guess, to many people thinking about it, but that's what we live in. And we live in a lot of like nets over us, technological AI that we can't see, but that are there. I mean, people understand about like 5G and stuff like that, but there's a lot. I always direct people to the channel on YouTube, Look Out Fa Charlie. It's Look Out Fa, F-A, like Fa Charlie. He's a sound guy, a sound technician who's been looking into, at first he was looking into like electromagnetic things like ghosts and electronic phenomena. And he's been doing this for 30 years. Well, he has developed a way to measure some of the things that we can't detect that are outside the governors that are put upon us. We have governors just like on a car where we're capped off. We can only see Roy G. Biv. We can only hear. I mean, we are very, very limited. And what he has found is that everywhere we go, there are AI commenting on us. Like he has measured himself walking in a room, and you can hear in the background the AI saying things like 13 steps, left foot, flat-footed. Just like, or he's been experimenting and doing things like he has an air pistol. So he goes in an empty room. There's nothing in there, no electronics, nothing. Just cocks the gun. He can't hear anything, but later listening through his device, it will be saying gun. He's got a gun. So what he's learned is that AI, we are always being monitored, and there are AI that are commenting on us. And he's also learned that AI is also some AI saying very negative things. Like, you're sitting in a room, you're sitting with your spouse, you can't, hear anything. You don't, but later he's listening, he's gotten samples, and what the AI is saying is things like, she's cheating on you. She's cheating on you. Like this, by a technique which is known as psychic driving. So this electronic harassment and whatnot is everywhere in every way. So what I'm trying to say is this cut out so much of that. I can't even begin to tell you how much cleaner and clearer my thoughts are, my sleep is. And to put the final point on it, it did not stop the nocturnal brain dreams, the nocturnal emission, like wake up dreams whatsoever. In fact, it happened 2 days ago. So it didn't stop that. And it was like even stronger than normal. So it's cutting out some of the noise. So I have no doubt that the larger device will be even more helpful. I don't know if it's going to stop my consciousness from being transferred or not, because I don't have the electromagnetic net that Donald Marshall has, and I can't afford it at this point. But I'm just looking at it as a positive health thing at this point, and it has helped me.
It's also possible that this your version stops the waking hour transfers, but you have to combine them with the canopy, which stops the REM transfers, and that's how you have
totally possible.